welcome to another episode of the Man in the Middle podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Mullally. This is an Ithaca Media podcast. Today's episode, we're going to be diving into a topic around exploring non-profits and how we can establish cyber champions within organizations. And I'm joined by three very special guests, and they're going to be sharing their own experiences on creating practical, cost-effective cybersecurity strategies tailored to this unique sector. So, gentlemen, I want to thank you for joining me on the podcast today.
Absolute pleasure, Jeremy.
Pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation.
No, it's my pleasure. Before we sort of dive into a couple of the questions I had, I want just quickly to sort of go around and hear around how you got involved in the cybersecurity sector, but then also specifically non-for-profits, as this is our topic today. So I'm going to start with you, Adrian, if that's all right.
Yeah, no worries, Jeremy. So I sort of fell into cybersecurity around 25 years ago when I came out of uni. The very first company I worked for was a cyber and identity-related software and product company. And since then, just fell in love with identity and have carried the career through. So we often say in identity that identity chooses you. So I definitely feel like I got chosen. How do we get involved in NFP? So when we started Identity XP, we deliberately wanted to make a difference in society. So one of those programs we set up was how do we help not-for-profit? So we do a lot of pro bono and at-cost work in that space. So more of the finances for that charity go to their actual mission.
And Rodney, yourself, how'd you get involved in cybersecurity and then also the non-for-profit sector specifically?
Yeah, well, I've had a technology background for a long while, and then my journey into security was by a fascination about how criminals can operate. I've worked for major banks, telecoms, utilities. That's where your efforts primarily impact the bottom line, right? Their profits. But if there's a place to do my best work, it's in not-for-profits, so I can directly support and protect vulnerable people. It's, as Adrian said, a social sort of conscience that says we should be doing this. And the best thing is it's working alongside these individuals who are inspiring, committed to the cause, and there's great satisfaction, job satisfaction if you can actually make a difference. So that's really where I've come from.
Yeah, excellent. Like, really great to hear that, like the passion side of it as well. And Denny, yourself, how did what's your background and story? How you got into this world?
Yes, I been working in risk assurance audit for a while, and I knew Rodney for quite a long time when I worked for Checkpoint Software, and that is a control focused conversation on firewall. And I realized that really as we progressed security landscape, the policies where the place to solve the problem, and to understand policy, you understand risk. So I connect back up with Rodney recently, and we start exploring some of the challenges he shared with me. And NFP is one of those particular challenging environment because the sheer number of volunteers, and it's very hard to scale security with technology. And that's where Adrian's expertise in identity, zero trust, able to identity as a new parameters. So that's how I got involved and got talking to both of them. So we were very fortunate to be able to join force at CyberCon in a couple of weeks to talk about this very important use case. In terms of NFP, just one of many sectors where clients with not specific, so I'm not specific focus NFP, but I have NFP experience in terms of leading a community in Australia for the risk communication, the standard called FAIR. So that committee ventured to initiate with NFP. So, and we relied heavily on volunteers like myself. So able to really manage that conversation is something I really feel the need to have that. And you were surprised that our community are made up of risk professionals. and they say, the cobblers sons are the worst shoes. And so take from me, it is not a simple challenge, even in our little bubble.
Yeah, fantastic. And like you were mentioning just there, Denny, all three of you are joining forces uh, in a few weeks at CyberCon, and that sort of brings us to the topic of today, which the topic for that talk is called "Building a Cyber Champion in an NFP." And I'll keep it with you, Denny. Could you sort of explain a couple of like sort of the main points of what that talk is centered on?
Definitely, yeah. So I think NFP is a challenge. NFP is not particularly unique, but they do have scalability challenge. As I mentioned just now, is the heavy reliance on volunteers. And one is because they're volunteers, there's only a limit in terms of what you can impose on what they do or don't do. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying they don't try to do the right thing, but that's not the focus. That's not the passion when they join the NFP. And of course, technology scalability is a real challenge because technology costs money. And at that scale, perhaps the money they do have might be needed to be directed at the mission, not the technology. So I would close out and saying that really what I've focused on in the fair conversation is to enable the community members, you, me, and everyone on this call as citizens to understand cybersecurity is not some critical technology problem. Technology enabled, but really is a business challenge. And the same example is like MFA, and of course we know the federal government spending a lot of good money to remind people must use MFA. And without going into technical detail, I will use the analogy of seatbelt. And we all seen advertisement for government. You could spend a lot of money to remind people to wear seatbelt. And I always question, hey, what's wrong with these people? Maybe they have their cars don't have seatbelt, and they didn't want to spend the money to buy seatbelt. That's a joke, of course. So that's a real challenge. People really understand, cybersecurity is a business problem, like seatbelt for personal safety in cars. So, and hopefully that will resonate with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, and I want to bring you in here, Rodney, because you've been working with Barnardos for I think 18 months is what you said, and I want to ask like what are some of like the unique challenges that are specific to this that non for profit sector? I think Danny brought up like a really great point there as far as the volunteering aspect. Obviously, introduces like a slightly different dynamic that's usually there with between an employee and a company. But could you sort of share some of the other unique challenges faced when it comes to building
Sure.
a strong cybersecurity posture in the sector?
Yes. Well, we all know that all organizations, those who work in the security field would know that all organizations have challenges, and they're mostly similar challenges. The point is that those challenges are sometimes accentuated or amplified in the not-for-profit space. For example, not-for-profits especially operate with limited budgets and very lean IT staff most often, which is just accentuated for compared to other organisations. This makes it harder to adopt, really comprehensive security measures. Sometimes you need to thin that out a little bit and focus and prioritise. Additionally, as Denny said, not-for-profits rely on volunteers or part-time staff. So there may be gaps in security training or awareness. And that's challenging to maintain consistent practices and secure systems. So, yeah, there's some of the extra challenges from a not-for-profit specific space.
Yeah, great. And like you brought up like a really important part there, which is around like potential gaps when it comes to the awareness piece of cybersecurity. And I'd love to throw this over to you, Adrian, as far as how can like in this specific sector, how can organizations look to build like much more cybersecurity awareness, given those sorts of challenges that are unique to the sector?
Yeah, definitely. Well, Rodney lives this day in and day out, but I can at least share what I've come across with our NFP clients from an identity perspective. Now, identity is a pretty unique field as under cybersecurity. So we deal with a lot of business processes, so onboarding and offboarding, and we deliver a lot of experiences as well. So if you think of something like multi-factor authentication that staff members or members that an NFP serve will interact with commonly, there's a lot of people touch points with what we do. So it's pretty important to get the comms and awareness and the change piece right for what we do. So a lot of the traditional techniques we've seen and used in projects, so email comms and rollouts, landing pages and on intranets, things like that. Starting to look at a bit of video as well. Then we started moving towards interactive clinics, so getting groups of people together in different departments and talking to the why, what's the rationale, why are we making these changes, and what's the benefit to the organisation or to themselves that they'll get out of it. More recently, even, and one of the reasons I really love this cybersecurity champion idea is focusing time in with key influential individuals in the business, talking to them about the change, getting them bought into the rationale, but also getting them to advise us on, now tweak the message like this. If you say and do this, it'll be more effective, or here's the best way to roll things out. That's really starting to make a bit of an impact in the way we roll out identity and access initiatives.
Yeah, great. And this theme we have here of a cyber champion. I want to ask around like what sort of qualities we're looking for when we actually use that term. And Denny, perhaps you can weigh in on this. Like what sort of skill sets and traits and qualities do you look for when it comes to a cyber champion within an organization?
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity to explore this particular point, which is a passion. And I mentioned early on, build a expertise in the standard core FAIR for is a global standard open group for risk communication. Simply put, is able to measure any risk, including but not limited to cyber risk, in financial terms. Now, just bear in mind, is like, am I trivializing risk and equating people's life and safety and well-being in dollar value? So, bear in mind, that is not really the objective of that. But to answer your question, really a champion is one that draw attention and give people a reason to do something, right? And champion is not necessarily a technology expert. And in fact, sometimes that become a burden. If you are technology expert in certain things, that can bias and somewhat discourage the artist to engage in with you. So the risk communication as a business language is a useful tool to establish the communication. You can go back to the seatbelt example rather than multi-factor authentication. You don't need any technical training to understand how to use seatbelt. You just pull it down and plug in the buckle of your the seatbelt holder. And of course, the government are struggling, as we know, spending good money on power television to remind people just a very simple act. And really, people are the gap is people overestimating, inflated their driving skill. And that put in perspective, you're probably too young to remember that, Jeremy. In the 50s, we didn't have seatbelt. And people drive around, rolling around in cars, right? Good old Holdens, no seatbelt. And there was, series of accidents. Don't get me wrong, it's not a joke. And that become mandated in manufacturing. But people don't remember the old days. They still think I'm a very good driver. I don't need seatbelt, right? And it's inconvenience and comfortable. And it's true. Seatbelt is one of the most comfortable things you can use in your driving experience. So I'm going to close out, and hopefully I'm not getting too off the topic. A champion is one that really helps you to see the values in in the individual decisions in practicing what they've been encouraged to do, and really connect. And let's come back to the financial expression of measuring risk is measured in terms of not necessarily in actual dollar and cents in physical dollars, but in terms of really the value impact, for a better term, the value impact, the consequence of what impact to your life. You got accident, you can't go to work for a few months. Well, that's a serious problem for you. But worse still, if you cause an accident to your loved ones, how can you live with yourself? This measurement and is intangible, and the financial expression is really a paraphrasing of measuring something intangible but important in a way that people can relate to. So that's really my specialization, and I have a great opportunity to work with Rodney and Adrian to kind of paraphrase that in our presentation. How can you explain that in an MP context? What do you care? Because they're not being paid as volunteers or part-time staff. They're not necessarily doing that for the money. So we need a different language. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, no, like I really appreciate you sharing that. Like what I'm hearing is just like the like how critical it is to relate it to what's most important to people and what's most valuable to people, especially like when you're stripping away from the financial element, as as important as that can be. Like I said, there's so many different elements that we hold in such high regard and value much more, uh, like our safety, our family, and so forth. So I think that's really critical to be able to relate it to that. But I want to throw it back to you, Rodney, because like you mentioned at the beginning of the episode, like one of the reasons you like working in the non-for-profit space is that sort of you are seeing the work you're doing translated quite well into like some big social impact and global impact type organizations. What I'd love to ask is like, do you have an example of where you've seen the work that you do when it comes to cybersecurity, how that's had a positive impact on an organization and specifically in this case Barnardos?
Yeah. Look, I think from a champion perspective, it's definitely been beneficial to raise the overall security profile, the overall security culture, and risk culture specifically. For example, I heard back a couple of years, the CISO from Wesfarmers said, what did he say? When I started at Wesfarmers, I had 20 pairs of eyes on the lookout for security issues, right? But now I've got 20,000 pairs of eyes looking. So from a security perspective, by having champions who can communicate, talk in the business language, more or less tell the people why we're doing things as opposed to the what and the how, because that's more technical type stuff. But as Adrian said earlier, why is this important, and relate that to them, then that helps. Yeah, that helps. Definitely helps. So while we're still developing our cyber champion program, and it's growing, it's clear that the champions play a crucial role in spreading security awareness, strengthening culture and security and risk, right? But at the same time, again, as has been said, they also are good at communicating back to us to sort of say, well, that message is not clear, it doesn't make sense. It definitely is a two-way thing, and those things are happening already. Already, I've seen noticeable increases in security questions coming back for clarity this year compared to last year, and we've also been able to measure a reduction in incidents and a measurable rise in reporting of phishing email simulation attacks. So the message is slowly seeping out there, and that's just through good communication. And that's where champions are really ideal, are really helpful, and lead the charge in that area.
I guess to bring the concept home there, so when we're talking about cybersecurity champions, we're really talking about cultivating allies in the organization. They're not part of cyber, they're not part of risk, but they're intelligent and inquisitive, so they are interested in those conversations, and you can get into those details with them so that you can turn them into advocates. They understand the position and what's at stake. They help us fine tune the message when we're trying to change and transform, but also take our messages and take them further into the business than what we alone could have done.
Yeah, so like a high level of buy-in and engagement from like key people within the
100%, man.
organization who might not be like you said, related to risk. Yeah, okay, that's excellent. Like, and
But they
you,
care about
Rodney,
the
you were touching.
organization, they care about the mission.
Yeah,
Very much so.
absolutely. Like, they're very much aligned to the vision. That's important. And Rodney, you're bringing up importantly, like just some of the metrics and the measurements, like you see, to actually see how a program like this is successful. And like you threw out a couple of things, and like what I was hearing was like that was important. There was you're noticing like more engagement year on, and like this like coming into this year from different people in the organization. But this is actually open to everyone. But what are some of the metrics you're looking for when you're measuring a program like this to see how effective it is and how successful it is?
I can kick off from an identity perspective if that gets the creative juices flowing, gentlemen.
Yeah.
So obviously identity is part of a broader cyber program an organization might be running, but really you want to get down to a few key but important metrics that you can communicate well and have a good story and buy-in behind them. So we tend to look at a few simple things like MFA adoption in the organization, so multi-factor authentication, how many users have it and are using it, and is our coverage right, and express it as a percentage or something like that. So you can kind of say, are we complete or not? We look at coverage of all of our key applications. So is everything protected with the right identity and cyber controls? Again, a percentage of completeness there, particularly around your key and most critical applications. So those storing sensitive personal information or involved in financial processes. One of the things we like to look at is the volume of automated identity activity. So when we look at joiner or mover or leaver processes, so onboarding and offboarding, how much of that's automated, how many of those are there, and try to roll that up into some sort of financial metric which shows the value to the organization. So this is cost avoided or cost deferred. And then you might want to split some of these metrics too. So how many of these apply to team members and inside the organization versus those that are protecting the members of the organization, those people that the organization serves. There's a few of the things we look at and try to communicate and bubble up.
Yeah, and I would support that, especially in the MFA world. I would suggest that MFA gives you the most bang for your buck.
Oh,
It's
incredibly so.
probably that's what I would say from a control perspective, and that's where it's most useful because for little outlay you can get a really huge return from a security perspective. So that would be accurate. I would also think that security awareness can give you a big leaning. Already people are focused on doing good things. They want to do the right thing, but if you can enhance their knowledge and awareness, hopefully they can recognize when there's a problem and then call out for help. It's just similar to a fire brigade, right? If you're walking down the corridor and you see smoke coming out of a pile of papers, you just don't walk past and ignore it. You actually do something about it. You call for help. You actually try to contain the problem, etc., etc. And you firstly you recognise it. So that's the sort of thing that's going to help, and that's another way of measuring how if we can measure the staff awareness, then we're doing better.
And what are some of the metrics you look at there, Rodney? So you're engaging, like, are you checking engagement with security awareness content or phishing simulation activity?
Yeah, all that. It's not easy to get awareness. You can do it through training because you actually measure that at the end of a training
Yep.
program. But I'm regularly putting posts up on the intranet, and I can see how many people are looking at them, how many people are liking them. And I sometimes send out to the heads of departments to say, oh, could you reinforce this with this particular post with your staff? And they, 9 times out of 10 reply, yes, definitely going to do that. So that's one way. And as you say about MFA, measuring MFA, phishing is another important tool. We've actually increased our reporting mechanism. There's one thing about recognizing phishing, and a lot of people just delete it. But we're now increasing the number of people, 300% since in 1 month, since last month, where they are actually reporting it. So that's a good thing, because then all sorts of benefits from knowing what's out there. And the other thing is we've increased that to a monthly event, so that people are now on the lookout for it. And if the real one turns up, they might even recognize it.
Building that muscle memory.
Good news.
I may actually jump in there because three make a crowd, right? So let me have some fun. And if I extend the analogy, Ronnie started with MFA, and but I pivot into my pet project of seatbelt. If I can do that, that's hopefully a little bit understand. So a parallel of secure awareness is the primary television advertising the federal government investing in. But in terms of metrics, right? You can ask the question: is primary television the best way to communicate with the community at large, at scale? And a similar challenge for NLP, lots of volunteers, part-time staff, and they might not get your memo, as you say, right? Didn't you get my memo? Well, I didn't watch a TV. I was watching something else, and they come on that because the ad time is when I do the other stuff, right? Go make a cup of coffee, do whatever you do, and then come back and watch the show. So the measurement of seatbelt would be you measure the sort of accident, including fatality, for failure to wear seatbelt, but different demographic ages groups, and particularly also often, unfortunately, linguistic diversity communities might not be familiar or not necessarily watching primetime television. You never get to them, and that's where alternate channels like TikTok, Instagram, maybe a better investment of those efforts. So those are the metrics. And going back to the technical topic like MFA, you look at the applications where MFA bypass, you can measure it. And you can just see is a certain business unit or third parties tend to bypass MFA. And this is really Adrian's expertise in that, and tying the identity. And then you target those education. Maybe there's a good business reason, such as you have to share account and enable really cost extra money, time is the money, right? You take extra 5 minutes for someone to log on between shifts, that's 5 minutes lost revenue. And
lost productivity and revenue.
Exactly. So I would just suggest, we need to be really talking to business as a champion, as what Adrian explained. Champion are people not in technology. And particularly those who are not in technology, they don't have a perceived bias. It's like, I just love the toy. And they really understand the business driver and the pain of the user. And you got to speak to people as people, and not to humiliate and belittle them and say, you idiot, why don't you just put on a seatbelt? There are good reasons people really do not understand. Maybe they could. So hopefully that put a dimension in terms of when you build a champion, their expertise in what they know, understand the community, would give you some idea what metrics you look for and to measure the effectiveness of what you do.
Yeah, excellent. And you kind of brought up the technology side there, all of you actually, and I want to be more specific on that. And Adrian, if I could ask you, what sort of emerging technologies are out there, and things like the automation side of things and AI as well have implications for the non-for-profit sector as far as assisting what we've been talking about today?
Yeah, no worries. Well, I think AI is the hot topic for all vendors in the cybersecurity space, and identity is no stranger to that as well. So it's identity conference season in Australia at the moment. So I think we've had about 4 or 5 conferences over the last 2 months at the moment, and every single vendor is talking about their AI capabilities and features that are coming out. What we've seen things like machine learning applied at scale in products like Microsoft and Okta for authentication and access management over the last couple of years even, where these vendors are looking at scale across all of the events and the signals they're seeing to flag risky and suspicious authentication events. And that automates and knocks out a lot of the, I guess, low-hanging fruit that people otherwise would have had to investigate, and lets people put in proactive responses like blocking authentications or triggering multi-factor authentication to take some sort of response activity. I think we're now moving more into that augmentation style of benefit that we can get to people through using artificial intelligence. So we're, especially in the not-for-profit space, we've usually got very limited resources in terms of people and capability, and often sharing jobs, so it's rare to get multiple people focused on identity in a smaller organization. But how do we make them more effective? So that's where AI is really going to play a big part moving into the future. So the vendors are all talking about features like describe in natural language the kind of access policy or experience that you'd like to deliver here, and the system will put it together for you. So that really drops the barrier to entry and the degree of subject matter expertise someone may need to understand in an identity product, and helps them get to a better, more secure position far more quickly than they otherwise would have had to. And often more cost effectively too, so you don't always have to engage expensive consultants to get a really good outcome there. You would have heard probably a lot of talk around zero trust in our space. It's a concept that we're advocating for very heavily in the identity industry, where every time you're logging into something or authenticating and all those touch points, systems are looking at signals for risky events and to understand, look, is this Adrian? Is this his device? Is it hygienically sound? Is this really him? Should I let him in? To do that at scale effectively needs machine learning, needs artificial intelligence and techniques like this to apply those protections. Otherwise, there's just too much data that these systems need to look at. But by applying those tools and techniques, and now we're getting quite simple products or easier to implement products that do a lot more for not-for-profit companies and keep them more safe out of the box with less effort from the NFPs.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing, Adrian. And it sounds like a lot of these technologies can assist with that challenge we already identified earlier, as far as being quite limited on resources in the non-for-profit space. So, being able to maintain a level of security without compromising too much in that sense. But keeping in the vein of the technology side of things, I want to ask sort of the inverse question, which is what kind of emerging technologies out there, and again we can keep with the hot topic of AI, pose sort of high risk for the unique vulnerabilities that are present for the non-profit space. And Denny, I'd love for you to weigh in on this one if you could.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity, and it's a good timing because I was deliver a presentation at an event last night, and Ronnie was in my audience, talking about measuring AI risk. And I think that we'll have good engagement. And Ronnie correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see you nodding off, so that was a good sign. But the point I'm making here is that in my presentation is kind of challenge the cliche that regulator are out there to get you by whacking, a very restrictive AI safeguards. And while that's necessary, and I create a visual image of, a AI-enabled superbike with training wheels that, not going very fast and not going around the corner, able to rub your knee against the road, and so take out the fun is like, what's the point of having a high-power superbike? And the one line of the cliche, the insight is and I share that in my presentation. That example, a regulator actually are trying to help you, but you need to help them to help you to enable them to relax the safeguard requirement compliance with your must, by really showing them you've done your homework and you can measure your risk. Because at the moment, particularly AI, and we think that 20 plus years ago in cyber, that so much inflated expectations. So naturally, regulator be conservative and impose very stringent safeguard, perhaps somewhat unnecessary in hindsight. I'm not saying they are unnecessary, but some of those can be relaxed if only the innovators themselves, the product developers themselves actually can understand, can measure the risk, and get the assurance to the regulator. And I'll close on this last point. I use an analogy, not seatbelt, so you'll be glad. Spare you on that. And of course, you probably don't have young children, Jeremy, but if you do, and your teenagers, they would not listen to anything you did say, right? Ronnie will be smiling because you have that. But their friends, or even your friends, as an uncle or auntie, say exactly the same thing. They pay attention, right? The risk measurement is where we need to help in terms of communication. Is when you tell them the risk is unacceptable, they ignore you. But you have the right communication channel when mentioned before the metrics, and you can measure the metrics because they start tidying the room and do your homework, and it's working. So hopefully that put a bit of humor into my response there.
It definitely did. I appreciate you bringing the humor, Denny, and but very good analogy for that there. I want to turn to like a bit of a pragmatic approach and throw it to you, Rodney. And I want to ask if you wanted to give one piece of advice, practical advice that you'd want to see implemented within a non-for-profit organization for their cybersecurity program, what would that be?
Yeah, it's hard to get it down to one piece of advice, but let's see if we can start. I would suggest for beginning the journey in security, information security, you start small, but aim for consistency. I always say that the weakest link in a chain is the problem. So you want to see if you can get across the broad range and aim for consistency and start lifting it slowly, and let's start small. Again, go for the practices which give the most bang buck, like multi-factor authentication. Regular updates is important. That's basically across the board and consistent. And because the OAIC say that a third of privacy breaches are human error, that's where the cyber champion, that's where the staff training, the awareness really comes to its own. And if we can lift that across the board, then again, you'll have more eyes looking for problems. So that's what I would be saying, those sorts of areas. Start small, but be consistent across the board.
Fantastic. That's great advice, and more than one piece of advice. That's excellent. Gentlemen, we are unfortunately coming to the end of this conversation, but I want to sort of finish on a high note and ask you all each if you could share, I guess, what you get most out of working in this sector of the non-profit space, because like we've alluded to a lot in this conversation is, you get to serve be a part of their mission and what they're looking to achieve and the impact that they have. But I'd love to go around the room and hear what you love most about the space. And Rodney, since you spoke, we can start with you.
Yeah, look, I already said that, if I do an average job, then it only affects profits of other companies. But here, if I do a bad job or a poor job, then it definitely affects people, and it affects vulnerable people in society. And of all the places I want to do my best work, it's here. So that's the thing that keeps driving me forward. And I think that's the most rewarding, when you can actually see that you've actually helped, you've made a difference, and you contributed to people's lives.
Yeah, love it.
Well said.
Adrian, how about yourself?
Our mission is to protect and enable our clients, and that really helps them protect and look after who they need to look after. And so I love that we're doing that, but I especially love that we're doing that in the not-for-profit sector, and we're making a real difference in helping these organisations. Our work there means more funds go to their mission and go to where that need is. So I'm really proud of that, and I love when my team comes to me and says they're proud too that they work for an organisation that does that. And it's probably just one of the initiatives we've got going on. We've got a Women in Identity program as well, where we help women transition back into the workforce after an extended career break or just want to change and get started in identity and access. And we're also running a conference every year, Identity Management Day. So April 8th next year. So save the date, everyone. But we try to equip the industry. It's mostly for identity practitioners, but new thinking, new ideas, new concepts to better protect their organizations and who they look after. So I love that we have impact despite being a small consultancy, and we're doing some good in the world.
Yeah, maybe I can jump in
Fantastic,
there, Jeremy. Last but not least, I'm sure you will agree with me that I'm really excited
I do.
opportunity to work with Rodney and Adrian in his conversation. And of course, NLP is the fabric of our society, and particularly we are all, sitting here comfortably. We have, professional roles, reasonable income, not living a castle, but it's okay. Got roof on our head, got food on the table. And but cost of living pressure is real, and NLP is really the drivers in that social cohesion. So anything we can do to help, and like it or not, we talk about AI, and jokes aside, it is here to stay, and we need to really help NLP to manage this challenge. And the least we can do without the burden of technology and the cost is just shift the conversation. And as I mentioned early on, what I try to champion is to understand that if you can connect people to understand the impact of their own individual decisions, such as not wearing seatbelts, such as not using MFA, and understand it's not a technology problem, it's not an inconvenience, there are real consequence. And this is how much it actually means to you, not necessarily measured in physical dollar and cents, but in terms of the actual tangible value to themselves and their loved ones, we will have a chance to move the needle. And you can close. I will close this kind of a cliche. There's a truism I mentioned earlier on. You can help the others to help you, because if you can present a strong analysis using the data to show them what the impacts are, and give them the analysis, the risk measurement, by helping them to make the right decisions and be able to make a proportionate decisions, it will ultimately help you.
Great. Yeah, and a very nice note to finish this conversation on, Denny. Appreciate that. To all of you, I appreciate you coming on the episode today, and I know I certainly enjoyed the conversation. I know our audience will as well. And for those listening, I recommend you hear a much more in-depth version of this conversation at your upcoming CyberCon talk, and would recommend that people go see that. But before we close out the episode, just respectively, for everyone, how can people get in touch if they wanted to learn either more about this or get in touch with you individually as well?
The best thing for me is to reach out to me via my LinkedIn profile.
Fantastic. Rodney?
No, all right, so
whoever.
Please go, Rodney.
Oh, I didn't say anything. Yes, it's similar for me. LinkedIn profile is fine, and that's a good way to respond and communicate. Thanks.
True, folks. And I've been Adrian Bolle from Identity XP. You can email me, adrian@identityxp.com, or like the other guys, jump on LinkedIn. So it's just /Adrian Bolle. Look forward to reaching out about any of the things we've talked about.
Fantastic. And thanks once again, gentlemen. Appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you, Adrian.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeremy.